Hey there, friends. John Popola here, and welcome back to the final episode in our series, The Poisoning of the American Mind. And this is a great one because this is the light at the end of the tunnel. This is what we can do as parents to choose alternatives. And believe me, I have done a lot of that. I have put my kid in a lot of different kinds of schools. And so I have sampled the waters out there for your benefit. And so I am here to help guide you to places that might do things better for you. It is up to you, though, as parents to make those decisions. There is no one size that fits all. And with that, let's get started. There is one antidote to the poisoning of the American mind. We have to pull our kids out of these government schools. And frankly, out of woke private schools for that matter, if that's not what you want for your kids. Part of the good news is there are now more and more options for parents who care about freedom, responsibility, and classical American values. And school choice in many places is winning. Our family has taken this journey personally. We have put our son Mateo in more schools than I've ever been in more schools than probably all but a handful of Americans have been in, especially without being a delinquent. So join me on a truly first-hand tour of school choices like few others. Mateo started off in Montessori preschool in New Jersey. As I've said, preschool is basically just playtime and a little bit of daycare. Let's just hope the government goons don't wreck this one too. The next year, he went to the local Catholic school for kindergarten. He hated it. It was far too rigid and frankly, too rigorous too early for him. When I asked the principal, a nun named Sister Mary Agnes, why kindergarten now kinda sucked, she told me that she actually agreed with me, but that this was in response to pressure from parents to model their school after what the public schools were doing.
I don't think I want to know a 6-year-old who isn't a dreamer or a silly heart. And I sure don't want to know one who takes their student career seriously.
This was shocking to me, and it started our path towards reimagining education in earnest. So when we moved to Texas the next year, we struck off on a different path and sent Mateo to a Waldorf school, which was a very interesting model that felt well suited to his early grades. These schools are more creative and more physical. They're nothing like the Prussian nightmares so many of us are used to. In fact, Waldorf was built explicitly in opposition to the Prussian model by an eclectic social reformer named Rudolf Steiner in Austria in the late 1800s, just as America was beginning its path towards Prussian educational hell. For 4 years, from 1st to 4th grade, he would come home routinely with his own dried blood on his knees because he was climbing up and falling out of trees. And we wouldn't even get a call from the teachers. It was just assumed that this would happen. And it was awesome. We somehow knew that this was important. We kind of knew that climbing trees at school, having long recesses outside, was maybe more important for him than the actual class content itself. Another interesting thing about Waldorf, the main primary teacher actually moves with the students in K through 12. And because of that, the teacher develops a close relationship with the students and sees each of their progress over the longer time scale. Now, as most of you know, that's nothing like traditional school, where a bunch of teachers go into the teacher's lounge and gossip about the kid that misbehaves, who's probably a boy. And they end up developing preconceived notions, so that when that kid comes to school the next fall, he's already got things stacked against him. He's already the bad kid. Stuff like that matters. As Mateo got older, we put him back in Montessori because Montessori is this very self-directed kind of learning, which appealed to our freedom-mindedness. So instead of all the students being the same age, all learning the same thing at the same time, which again is unlike any other time in history and any other time in our adult experience, Maria Montessori said, you will have large blocks of time where you do your work. And you've got assignments for the week that you need to get done. And we are trying to bring you all roughly up to a level. But our goal is for you to actually master your task. And to master that, you have to go at your own pace because you're going to get finished at a different rate than everyone else. If you get finished early, awesome, you get to move on. If you're a little slower, you get to take the time you need to actually truly learn and get it right. You're not going to be like Albert Einstein, sitting in class bored out of your mind because you're too smart for all this nonsense, you get to move on to a new challenge. That's a great way to avoid some serious problems, because a lot of times the smart kids are the ones that actually have the behavioral problems because they get bored so fast. Montessori solves for that. If that sounds supremely reasonable, that's because it is. Common sense is radical compared with traditional schooling. And our son thrived in the Montessori method. What we didn't realize at the time was that most Montessori schools essentially stop at 5th grade and transition to a much more traditional model, often called baccalaureate, for middle and high school. And this, middle school, the Hunger Games, is where our experience offers you, dear viewer, a word of caution. Depending on what matters to you most, some private schools can indeed be even more woke than your local Prussian prison. The woke indoctrination that is teacher training unfortunately impacts all school systems. And in many cases, the more alternative schools can attract the most revolutionary types, frankly, the commies. For this reason, I do believe that homeschooling is often the best alternative if you can do it. And here's why. You see, my son's school went off the rails for him as he entered middle school back in 2018. It started kind of innocent enough. I noticed that he started making jokes with his buddies like, "Today my gender is an Apache helicopter." Gender identity suddenly became common discussion in my back seat while driving the kids around, usually mocking, but still weird. Then I learned that a speaker was invited to the school to tell the students about their implicit biases and how to overcome their white guilt. Not good. My 10-year-old son was guilty of nothing. Then I learned that the kids were being encouraged to protest against guns at the Capitol and given the day off if they did. And keep in mind, we're in the capital of Texas. He didn't go, but he did feel pressure to participate as an activist. 6th grade. A real doozy, which I only learned years later, was that he was asked for one class to come to school in a dress so that he could act out what it would be like to be a trans student going to the prom. Again, 10 years old, prepubescent. Believe me, he wouldn't have gone back to that school the next day if I learned about that at the time. That is just pure evil. But what really put it over the top for me and my wife at the time, and again, we didn't know about this drag show class, was the school's plan for Martin Luther King Day. No, they didn't plan for a speaker to come and talk to the kids about King's message of colorblindness and the content of one's character. Remember that colorblind pedagogy is out the door. Instead, the school intended to screen a documentary about Harvey Milk, the gay rights activist, which would include fairly explicit Pride Parade visuals for my 6th grade son. Needless to say, having thankfully noticed this plan via email, which they did send out to let parents know, he did not attend school that day. And the following week, I had a sit down with the principal that was very revealing. It was a kind and reasonable exchange. The principal clearly felt that the school was doing what's best for the kids in their eyes. I, obviously, disagreed. And here was the crux of the problem. At one point, I offered something like the following. You know, one way to talk to our kids about their rights is to divide them up. Women's rights, gay rights, black rights, Latino rights, etc., etc., etc. But there is another way, and that is that we all have individual rights as human beings. That these rights are something that we share, not something that distinguishes us based on our identity. His response blew my mind. Here's how he replied. "Wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it. You should come and share this perspective with some of our staff." And that was the end of my son's time at that school. This kind, empathetic, compassionate, seemingly reasonable 25-year teaching professional was honest to God, acting as if he'd never heard of our rights as articulated by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. That universal contra-identity politics creed seemed downright new and novel to him. This is the problem in a nutshell. Our woke educators are like fish unaware that they're in water because it's all they've ever known. They don't know what it's like to come up for air. They've never breathed it. I could see that this was no environment for my son. He needs to know how to breathe the air of freedom and individual rights. He needs to know what the good, the true, and the beautiful are before he becomes an activist critic. And I'd rather him not waste his time on that if I'm being honest. So we pulled him from that school and put him in Acton Academy, whose values more aligned with our family, and which quite uniquely continues the self-directed model inspired by Maria Montessori straight through high school. My son Matteo flourished in ways that truly astonished us. He's a pretty smart kid, but by no means did he seem like some outstanding academic heading into 7th grade. To be honest, he seemed pretty average. And yet, Acton empowered him profoundly. He read books like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl and Meditations by Marcus Aurelius in 7th grade of his own choosing. And because he chose out of his own interest, they made a real impact on him that lasts to this day. Acton puts control of the learning experience largely, but not entirely, in the hands of the kids. And again, it's pretty incredible how much people are capable of when you arm them with agency to make their own decisions for themselves. One other important feature of Acton Academy is a focus on apprenticeships. Inspired by the experiences that actually built America before the Prussian takeover, Acton encourages work starting as early as middle school. So Matteo has consistently had real jobs, from taking the bus to corporate offices to cutting down trees for public works, since he was 11 years old. That is a real education in and of itself. Matteo thrived for 5 years at Acton Academy, and it's an approach I highly recommend. They're the fastest growing private school network in the country as well, so you might even have one in your area. I encourage you to check them out. There were 2 things missing from Matteo's school experience as he approached his senior year: getting to play basketball on a serious team, which is something he truly loved, and getting a stronger foundation in his Catholic upbringing. So we decided, what the heck, what's one more school change before you graduate high school? And with that, my son changed schools his senior year to the majority Mexican-American San Juan Diego Catholic High School, and did so without skipping a beat. He met new friends, and he kept his current friends because today's internet-connected generation can do that in ways that we never could. He played on the varsity basketball team, and even went to state for track and field. His senior year was a time of growth and flourishing. As his senior year last year was taking shape, we were all confronted by the collapse of our education institutions. The barbaric celebration of terrorism that broke out across college campuses last fall, before the war even began, shook our family profoundly and underscored everything we're talking about the corruption of American education. So, of course, we wanted to offer our son an alternative path for his next step. And as Italian Americans, we thought, why not go to school in Italy? It'll be much cheaper, and you'll be in Italy. I mean, that's an education unto itself. We visited schools across the country with him last spring. He decided, hey, this is a pretty good idea. And a few weeks ago, we watched his plane take off for Rome. And then, of course, I wept in the car like a baby. Believe me, I'm barely holding it together right now just thinking about this. Look, I know all of this sounds kind of crazy, and it is. But one lesson our son has learned from all of this change, is how capable he is of adapting in a rapidly changing world. He knows for a fact, because he's done it again and again and again, that he can find his footing in a new environment and make it work. Now, he's learning how to adapt to a new city, a new country, a new language. He's meeting people from all around the world. Whatever academic work he does at university, I'm confident not only that he's ready for the challenges, but he's going to come out of the next few years wiser and more mature for it. Yes, he'll still encounter plenty of communist nonsense. It's an inescapable plague like bacteria that covers the planet. But I know that we've done all we can to prepare him to confront challenging ideas from a foundation of personal integrity, agency, and critical thinking. That is all we can do. That is what being educated is about. The experience of my family is just one of a million stories. And the truth is, the right thing to do for our kids' schooling is almost certainly different for each and every one of our kids. For some, it's a good private school. For others, it's a local charter. For a lot of us, if you have the time and resources, homeschooling or a micro school are probably the best options of all because of that one-on-one interaction you will get. One thing I know for certain is this: every parent deserves more choices. We had that ability. We could make that choice because we could afford to do it. That's a privilege that every parent could have if we demanded it. Our government certainly spends enough of our taxes to do it, almost half of our massive state budgets, and billions more on top from the federal government are pumped into our woke Prussian prison system of a public education. Its monopoly of K through 12 rivals that of Microsoft Windows in the 1990s, when the US government launched an antitrust lawsuit against the tech giant. We must go even farther to rejuvenate American education. Every education dollar spent should be directed by us as parents for our kids, just like the GI Bill or student loans for college. We should be free to choose where to send our kids to school with the funds our government takes from us for that purpose. If everyone had that power, the monopoly over time would and will come to an end. And in its place, I believe we will see the resurgence of an ecosystem of options as diverse as our kids' interests and abilities, as diverse as Americans are as a people. I'm confident about that because we've been there before. This is what America was actually built on: a decentralized, privately led ecosystem of educational experiences. This is not radical. This is fundamentally American. This is also the path to depoliticizing our education experience. If you want your first grader to have gender queer in their library, I don't have to worry about my kid being exposed to that nonsense because he's not going to go there. And you won't have to worry about your kid being turned into some retrograde Catholic right-winger like me and my friends. With universal school choice, we might just be able to finally say goodbye to the Prussian prison system, tumultuous town halls, screaming matches at school board meetings, and rowdy Randy Weingarten. And maybe, just maybe, we can stop the poisoning of the American mind once and for all. All right. That is the end of our series, The Poisoning of the American Mind. But it is not the end of exploring education here on Dad Saves America. It is the most important issue to me. It is the determining factor on the future of our culture, of our country, of our kids. They spend so much time in school, and we need to figure out what's the right school for them. And that is what we as parents can do. I hope this episode has helped round out your thinking about your options and about your opportunities to help avoid the poisoning of your young American's mind. And of course, if you want to find out more or dig even deeper, head over to dadsavеsamerica.com, become a subscriber, explore the resources we've got there. And if you've missed the prior episodes, there is a whole playlist where you can check them all out, all in a row. And of course, last of all, have a great weekend.